Everyone to the next in our series of innovation in mining. Today, I have Tiffany Connaughton with me, who is a long time professional in extractive industries that right now is bringing her expertise to the very important and very complex, and let's just say it, this is a difficult topic of gender-based violence. And Tiffany's here to lay out some strategies that she has learned that she is in the process of leading for mining companies. And first of all, Tiffany, welcome and thank you for being with us today. We'll say, first of all, the importance of gender-based violence strategies. I mean, this has got to be a tough topic. When you speak to mining leaders, what are some of the responses that you hear, and how do you go about explaining just how important gender-based violence strategies are?
Thank you so much, Erica. And it was a great welcome. I'm really excited to be here today. I think the importance of the gender-based violence strategies and what I do hear from leaders in this space all the time, there's a little bit of a why are we talking about this? And I think that it's an interesting and very valid question. And what I typically will respond is that gender-based violence affects every person and can. So
Mm.
we're not only talking about women, which I mean, according to the statistics, is the majority, but there's also men within organizations that are facing this. In fact, 3 in 10, according to a 2024 survey. So I mean, I think that we really need to tackle this as the underlying issues to recruitment, retention, employee engagement, all the things that the companies are trying to work on. We are looking at a very large gap in talent acquisition for the future, especially in the mining industry itself. I can pull the statistics on it, but it's a very large number. I want to say to the tune of 50 to 80,000 people. So how
Mm.
do we make sure that our organizations are set up and created in a way that people feel safe and it's not just a paycheck anymore? New generations, we could go on forever about all the reasons why we need to make sure that we are creating these different organizations for people, but gender-based violence is a major issue that affects all people. It affects the marginalized communities way more, and we need to start kind of making that a part of how we support our employees within organizations.
Yeah. So there's a great synopsis, Tiffany. Thank you for the prize that's behind this, right? Like, we need to get better at creating environments where people can do good work and where they want to stick around and work for the mining company, whether it's at the site or at the office level within the mining industry. So we've already done a whole series on the talent crunch and how important that is to the future of the mining industry. And just before we go a little any further, I mean, some people are familiar with the acronym GBV, or gender-based violence. And as you alluded to, it's not necessarily just women that are affected by this. This is everything to do with harassment, bullying. Maybe when we hear violence, we think of like someone physically punching someone else,
Very true.
but
Yes.
maybe there's other stuff too that's included in this heading that would still be enough to cause people to leave, even if it's not a matter of physical confrontation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. As a survivor of gender-based violence in the workplace myself, I find that that particular definition really does come across as a physical definition. And I can tell you from
Mm.
personal experience, it's not. It's all of the things, unwanted emails, unwanted text passes, all
Mm.
of the sexual, innuendos that occur, slapping of butts and grabbing, on the more physical side of things. But we also get into there's a piece about even the perceived notion. So if we talk about the mining industry in specific, there's a lot of stories out there from past history, and the stories end up with their own life. So if we talk about a camp situation, camps are very perceived very dangerous for women
Mm.
specifically, and that perception in its own form is a place where gender-based violence lives because it's in their belief system, and if it's in their belief system, then it's real. So there's a lot of work to be done around that as well. So sometimes we're not even just tackling the physical pieces of gender-based violence, we're really tackling the notion of what it could be as well. So that was a great question to kind of lead into, like, what is this big topic that we're covering today?
Yeah, for sure. And, for mining companies that have so many deadlines and so many urgent things to tend to. You know, the struggle is real with this one. I'm going to say as soon as you get into the part about perception and how people feel, I'm going to guess that a lot of our audience, are feeling a little bit maybe helpless around that. Like, what am I supposed to do about what people think and how they feel? That maybe they're not meant for the mining industry if they're going to be scared off by a harmless joke or something like that. Like, I can definitely see, and maybe rightly so, people feel like they're not able to sort of control or manage this, and they might feel tempted to just kind of let it go, let it ride. But you were telling me a little bit before we, started the interview, that there are some updates to the laws right now, specifically the occupational health and safety laws that mining companies are subject to, at least in Canada, that are bringing this to the forefront and kind of making ignoring it not an option. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Definitely. And I think the two front runners right now are Ontario and Quebec, but they're setting precedent for the rest of the country. And the OHS laws are being changed to include all forms of harassment, bullying, and violence. So they've actually really deepened their definition of this. They're also making it a corporate responsibility to not only respond and protect, but to prevent. And I think that's a
Mm.
step in what we're seeing. So if companies choose to ignore and kind of take that responsive, I guess, approach, and they'll just deal with it when or if it's reported and happens, then they're going to be set back according to the law, and they could be persecuted. And some of the fines I saw in the legislation are quite steep. So I think that there's this message from the government saying we're no longer going to tolerate this as our culture in Canada, which is great. Gender-based violence is one of those things that kind of transforms between our home lives and our personal lives to our workplaces and vice versa. It doesn't have a place that it lives. It lives in all society. And I think that, kind of just speaking from personal, this isn't written, but that's probably one of the reasons the government is getting heavily involved in this and asking corporations to really level up in their response.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for your generosity in sharing that you have been through this yourself. And I know that you're working with several other Artemis businesses. Some of them as well have lived experience, unfortunately, of this phenomenon. And we can see now, we can leverage that lived experience into truly effective recipes or formulas, if you will, that are going to be able to address that really difficult question of not just how do we react to this or how do we cover this up by getting people to sign NDAs when something happens, right? How do we really get under the surface of this issue without, starting finger pointing or telling people how terrible they are? Really just saying, look, these are the conditions. This is what's been happening. It's widespread across many industries, not just mining.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do about it? How can we be better? This is the heart of the innovative part of the question, right? So, first of all, yes, thank you for sharing that you're bringing your personal experience to this, as well as a whole lot of data and some process here. There's some science that you've put together into a process that you're willing to discuss with the mining leaders that are interested in taking their gender-based violence strategies to another level. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the first thing that you touched on there, Erica, that's really important for us to really address and to make sure is out in the room is a word that I use very often, and that's grace. This
Mm.
is not anyone's fault. This is not the bad mining companies created awful work environments. This is we are here because of so many different levels of societal pressures, of decisions, of government. Like we could go, that's like a whole probably 6 month conversation if we really wanted to dig into how we got here. The reality
Yeah.
is that we're here. And I would argue that 99.9%, it's almost 100% of people, once they know, they are appalled and they want to change. And there's this, and you mentioned it earlier in our conversation, there's this, what do I do? And there's a
Mhm.
loss of how to do it. It's not language that we've learned. We just never have dealt with this before. So the first thing is approaching this with grace and understanding that there's a level of knowledge that we have to work with. And then once that knowledge is out there, it's collaboratively addressing the issue. So you mentioned that I work with a number of Artemis members, and I do because I firmly believe that in order for us to get to the very root of this and to make this a sustainable solution for all companies, including mining companies, is that we have to have an integrated approach. We need to make sure that there's all the voices at the table. We need the inclusion specialists, we need the gender-based violence specialists, we also need the mental health and wellness specialists. We kind of need all of these champions to develop these solutions. And that's exactly what we do, which I think is one of the more unique options for clients that are on the market, is that we have this integrated approach. The second part is making sure that we understand that this is not just coming in and Googling gender-based violence strategy and then trying to implement it. It's really understanding the company. So it's like the very first thing that we do. All companies have this issue, but to what level, where, how, where are the gaps, like really understanding it so we can target those areas and make sure that we also celebrate the places that they're doing amazing work, because companies have been tackling this on different levels and maybe not under the gender-based violence, heading. They've been doing this work for a number of years. So we want to make sure that we celebrate that. So, we really take a deep look. So we go communications, we go, kind of what does the reporting look like? What does the support look like? We also change the language. And I think it's important that we talk about witnesses, because witnesses to gender-based violence are just as affected as what we call targets. So we don't call them, victims, because we want to make sure that they're empowered. So we really change the language within organizations as well to say targets and witnesses. So everybody within the organization is affected. And that's the approach that we take. So, kind of grace, integration, and then making sure that we understand that everyone in the organization will have some level of interest in this topic.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of a peek into the formula of this program that you have now. If mining companies want, or mining company leaders want to understand a little bit more, like you said, I think lots of mining companies are really doing their best to address this issue, and they've maybe tried some different things. And it sounds as though your program would be in a position to recognize and assess and absorb that, and then figure out how to take it to the next level. It sounds like it's very tailored based on what the individual mining companies have done already in this space.
Yeah. And we find that that's the best sustainable solution, because we're not trying to put them in a box. We're creating, a box around them, which is a very different approach, I think, than what's happened in the past.
And I love the way you're saying as well that this isn't anyone's fault. We can approach this with grace. Where I come from as a Lean Six Sigma person, it's about not making the problem you versus me, but let's both come stand shoulder to shoulder. Let's look together at the problem and let's work, it's us against the problem. And how can we learn? How can we experiment? How can we innovate? How can we try something? And, this is very deep work. This is very powerful work that you're talking about. It goes across maybe a few different silos of different departments and different people's responsibilities, which is maybe one of the reasons that this type of approach hasn't maybe been tried before. It's not the standard solution that's out there on the market right now.
Yeah. And I think that brings up a really good point, because, in many organizations, budgets are very siloed to departments. So when you start trying to work across departments within organizations, it's one of the largest barriers that we see to this, is that we almost have to have all of the decision makers in the room, or we have to have the top decision maker to make the decision to set aside, kind of like that chunk of resources, right? And then also when we talk about resources, it's just not just financial. There's resources within the organization that have to come to the table too. So when you're working across these, vast different departments and there's even different processes in some cases that we have to kind of, work with. So that's a lot of the foundational work that we work with organizations up front, is, like there's some pieces to kind of their internal work that have to kind of transcend across that.
That's great. So there may be members of our audience right now that are wondering, okay, I'm on board. I want to be part of the solution. Sometimes we talk to mining leaders whose kids are starting to enter the mining industry. They've spoken about, oh, my daughter is at the camp, and it kind of brings that commitment to let's take care of everyone. Let's make sure that the environment is safe, not just safe from a, let's not injure people, but also from a sort of a holistic perspective. How would they maybe proceed to get some support within their organization to think about implementing the approach that you're offering?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is let's talk. Like it's really about, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever that looks like, and let's discover, where you're at and then what can be done. We always try and have what we call pre-work or immediate actions, which in some people's language is low-hanging fruit. There are things that we can do right away to kind of start the process, as because it is a long-term solution. This isn't something that we're going to solve in a month or 2 months. We're talking about a long-term solution. The strategies are usually multi-year. That's what we see typically, because there is human elements to this. There's human change, and humans resist change. So there's change management pieces, project management. They can be quite complicated, but it all starts with a conversation, and kind of just bring on the courageous bit that wants to talk about this in a real sense, and we can do that, and then we'll kind of work towards what is the next step of that plan. How do we ensure that as a mining leader, that you feel that you're putting your best foot forward and you're able to create the environment for your employees and your teams that you really want to create. Yeah.
Amazing. Tiffany, thank you so much for taking us through a really tough topic. And thank you to everyone who's watching. We know that this can be very heavy, and I really appreciate, Tiffany, the very solid, evidence-based, hopeful perspective that you're leaving us with, that, we can bring a new approach to the table, we can innovate, we can go deeper to really evolve the culture of these mining companies into something that is that much more productive and safe and good for the bottom line, as well as good for the humans working in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciate being able to have this conversation today and to just really open up this tough conversation. I think that a lot of times it's like, oh no, we'll talk about that tomorrow. It's a little bit of it is a heavy topic, and there's a lot of heavy work that is included in it. But I firmly believe that, if we partner together in this kind of brave space and we have these critical conversations, that we can really make a difference. So I appreciate the opportunity for sure.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.